I'm not sure whether it's live just yet.
Well, you're live.
Okay.
I think it's live now.
So yeah, we're just playing around with the new YouTube live streaming thing. They sort of changed for those of you who don't do a lot of stuff on YouTube, they've been sort of rolling out the new YouTube Studio over the past year or so.
Yeah, it's taken forever.
And for a lot of the time, they've had the live streaming functionality in the sort of old thing. Now it's in the new thing. So, we're live. It's good. We can get you into the chat before we start, so you don't miss anything that's important right at the start there. And yeah, I like this setup. It's good.
It's a lot better.
You get the comments on the side.
Oh, that's
there.
cool.
We can see the preview and everything. So
I've got the comments in size 1 font on my Razer thing here, but whatever, I can just make out.
Oh, you can zoom in on there.
I've tried. Isn't it Control mouse wheel?
Control plus.
Control plus. Where's the plus on this thing? No. Oh, there we go. Okay, we've overdone it.
Steve's just learning about basic functionality in Google Chrome there.
I've always used the mouse wheel.
Does your mouse work?
The mouse,
okay, it works.
The mouse works.
Okay.
I've always just used the mouse wheel to do that. Anyway, the good news is we can start.
Good.
So let's just start and stop talking crap and get on with it.
And we're here in my studio instead of Steve's because you decided to drive out this way for once.
Yeah. Yep. I don't even know why. I thought just at the end of doing all the benchmarking and everything, I wanted to get out of the office. I've been pretty much a hermit for the last week and a half I usually do a lot of benchmarking, but the last week and a half has been insane. And I've been
too many releases.
Yeah, I've been like writing my script in between benchmark runs of anything that's sort of like semi-automated, like, a Corona benchmark or something. So it's been hectic, but I'm glad to be through it all now so we can sort of cruise and go through the regular content. I still want to do like the 3950X versus the 1900KS using tuned memory. I'd like to test I reckon it'd be interesting to test I don't know how many games, but a lot of games with the 3970X with like the 3950X in there, maybe the 1900K, just test a whole heap of games.
Yeah, because it seemed like there's been a few people that were surprised by your results in the game section testing of the new Threadripper video, sort of people saying that it doesn't line up to other people's results and stuff like that. I mean, when I was sort of going through your review and comparing it to other people's reviews when they went live, for the games that you could compare, like if you take your Shadow of the Tomb Raider to another site, Shadow of the Tomb Raider or something like that, everything seemed pretty standard to me. It just seemed like other people were testing, much older games that
I think Shadow of the
don't play or stuff like that.
I saw a lot of people commenting were talking about the Shadow of the Tomb Raider results and mostly comparing them to Gamers Nexus. And I said, well, maybe go around and have a look at a few different places. And a couple of people like, oh, I only trust you guys in Gamers Nexus. So it's like, well, that limits your options if we if we have opposing views on things.
You might want to look at a third site there.
But as a lot of you guys know, I speak with Steve from Gamers Nexus quite a bit. We're pretty good friends. And when I saw the Shadow of the Tomb Raider results, I was like, that can't be right. Like, I've done something wrong, or there's something wrong here. So I have a TRX 40 install on that system, and then I had an AM4 install on the 3950X plus all the other Ryzen CPUs. And basically I retested those twice, got the exact same results. I checked the Intel system, same results. So then I actually took the SSDs from each of the AMD systems and just swapped them over. I thought, screw it, I'm just going to see what happens. I didn't change any chipset drivers, didn't change any configuration, just let Windows do its thing where it reconfigures. And then I retested the TRX 40 system with the AM4 drive and vice versa, and I got the exact same results again. So at that point, I was pretty confident the results were accurate. Then I spoke to Steve, and he showed me his results, and they were completely different. And so I said to him, are you testing in-game or the CAN benchmark? And he said the CAN benchmark. And I said, in-game is much more demanding. And he said, no, it's not. I'm like, okay. So that was kind of the end of that conversation. But in my testing, where I test is significantly more demanding than the built-in benchmark. So we just had a difference of opinion on that one. That was kind of it. But then when the reviews went live, as usual, I'm sort of sweating a bit, thinking, oh man, I hope, because it's sort of our credibility on the line as well. Like, we kind of know what we're doing when it comes to benchmarking. So screwing something like that up sucks. But then there was like a whole list of guys that tested in-game performance and found very similar results to what I did, at least relative to the 1900K. And one of them was like Guru 3D, for example.
Yeah, the important thing was that the new Threadripper parts are much closer to the Intel like 9900K than the previous Threadripper parts, which were much slower.
Sure. The one thing that's still a bit odd with my own results that, as far as I can tell, they're very accurate, but the Ryzen 9 and Ryzen 7 parts are much slower than Threadripper in that particular test.
Yeah,
And
but
then-
that wasn't the case in general, though.
No, it wasn't.
So, there's always going to be
Yeah, sure.
outliers. And, even in games, like, it's always nice to test a game and think that you're going to get general performance in that game. But
Yeah.
games are so varied these days, especially titles like Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which might have you sort of larger open world areas to sort of play around in. You can get to a section like if you can play, take a game like Metro Exodus, for example, you can play the first like 10 hours of that game and not get to the most demanding parts, which
Yep.
can be much later on when they completely change their environments and they start using like different things in there.
Yeah, I
And-
suspect I'll have to update where I test that game. But anyway,
Yeah. I mean, it's just the case with all sorts of games. Like, yeah, it's too hard to sort of give performance that might line up to what everyone else is doing, especially if everyone's testing in-game areas and not just using the benchmarks.
that's right. I strongly feel for most games, you're best off avoiding the canned benchmarks. For GPU testing, it's probably okay. I know there's sort of a risk there that AMD or NVIDIA can optimize for the built-in benchmark, but I don't think we've seen too much of that over the last decade.
Yeah,
I don't know.
think a lot of the built-in benchmarks, they sort of, some of them, the rare one is good in that it's like it just plays a section of the game.
So that'd be like F1
Yeah, like
2019.
F1 2019, you run around the circuit, and it's like, okay, that's pretty representative. But then a lot of cam benchmarks, they sort of do a thing where they fly through a scene and they show like all the different graphical effects that they've put into the game, so that like there's an explosion. But I don't think that's ever super representative, because it's like you're only really concerned with the minimum performance in a game for GPU benchmarking, because like you want to make sure that in the most intensive area in the game you're getting an acceptable level of performance, you're not below 30 FPS or whatever. Whereas like it's all well and good to show your explosions and your big city scenes and then move to a scene that has like, I don't know, a lot of water effects or something. But if you don't see those scenes side by side in the actual game, then there might be a more intensive scene that, it doesn't matter if an explosion is intensive if the explosions are never in the most intensive part of the game.
Sure.
And I think that's where a lot of these developers would be better off just like putting your character on screen and just having it run through like the Red Dead Redemption 2, the very end scene there, I think is quite okay, because you're just running through on your horse through the most intensive part of the map. Whereas like the earlier parts of that benchmark are just them doing stupid stuff that...
Yeah, well, I agree with pretty much all of that. GPU testing is a bit different because I've said this tons of times in the past. I'm not really saying or guaranteeing you'll get this sort of frame rate.
Yeah.
It's more a margin thing. So you're looking at performance relative to nearest competitors. So wherever you're testing the game, whether it's a demanding section or a not so demanding section, and I'm generalizing quite heavily here, usually the margins stay fairly similar, though we've seen examples like Apex Legends, for example, where there's a massive difference in some sections. I think like interior sections, NVIDIA GPUs do significantly better than outside it levels up a bit more. But with CPUs, obviously, it's important to test a CPU demanding section, because otherwise you're just testing the GPU. And there'll be some games where certain sections of the game, it's mostly GPU bound, but then when it does become CPU bound and you're calling on your CPU to have stuttering and stuff, then it's just annoying.
Yeah, well, I've been recently playing through Borderlands 3 on my 2950X, and in the open world areas, the draw distance seems to completely tank CPU performance in that game. Like when you're having to draw all the objects really far into the distance in those bigger open areas, my 2950X just chugs. Like this one core is pegged at 100%, and that's what I want to figure out in your CPU benchmarks. You want to make sure you're testing that, not testing the smaller areas of the game where it's not as representative.
Yep. Codger Face says, did GN Steve say if he checked the Shadow of the Tomb Raider can benchmark to validate if it was representative of an average of various areas in the game? I know he's done that with other games, basically with what we saw most recently with Red Dead. So with Red Dead, I think from memory, did he benchmark like the first hour of the game and compare that to the can benchmark? Was it? I think he did
Sure.
I think he did like 5 to 10 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes, 20 to 30, or something like that. And if he did that with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, The first, how long would you say of that game?
4 hours until you get to
Okay.
that first larger
Where we
open
test.
area where you
Yeah.
test.
So for the first many hours, up to 4 hours, Tim believes the game is very similar to the CAN benchmark. It's mostly GPU bound because it's not an open sort of world environment or a larger world environment. So yeah, if Steve's saying that the canned benchmark is the same as actual gameplay and they're basing that on the first hour, 2 or whatever, and it's not up to where we test, then he's probably right. But anyway,
Yeah, I mean, we've seen many instances of you needing to get quite far into the game, like Assassin's Creed Origins, for example. Some of the big cities in that game, you're not directed to in the game unless you know exactly where it is on the map and you can just ride your horse there. You're not really directed to that part of the game for 10 hours in a game like that. Red Dead Redemption 2, when I played through that on consoles, you don't get to Saint Denis in the bottom sort of right part of the map for a long time, like 20 plus hours if you're sort of doing a lot of the stuff. And in that game, the night scenes in that city are the most intensive. And it's like, if you're just going in there, and that's why I think the benchmark in that game is quite good, the last scene. But if you just sort of, I mean, the opening parts of the game as well are reasonably intensive because they're also at night and in the snowy sections. But if you're just in the plains, like, you could be getting 20, 30 FPS higher than you would get in those sections. No, Rockstar games are always like that. You go into the city and the FPS just falls off a cliff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's interesting as well how, when a game comes out, we don't really have time to spend like 10, 20 hours figuring out where the most intensive parts are. But over time, when we sort of play through and figure it out a bit more, then, hopefully our results become a bit better over time.
Yeah, it is a hard thing to nail for all of the games, especially when you're doing like 30 of them. Mobius 2K says, will 1080p ever be replaced by 1440p for CPU benchmarking? Well, I suppose you could have said that about 720p. So I'd say the answer is yes. It's just a matter of when. And basically everyone would make that step when 1440p is mostly CPU bound rather than GPU bound with a high-end graphics card.
And again, it'll be interesting to see how that goes with next generation consoles, because as we know, whatever consoles can do kind of dictates what a PC can do.
Yep.
And when they're going to get like a big jump to 8 Zen 2 cores for the CPU, I think games are going to become much more CPU demanding and much more storage demanding as well, because another thing that consoles are doing is moving from a hard drive to an NVMe SSD. And part of the thing that they've showed in a lot of their demos is, you can fly through a city and load all these things in, no pop in. It looks great. And I think for PC gaming as well, you're going to need to start getting much faster storage to sort of handle the things that developers are going to do to match what can be done on a console.
Yep.
So with 2 big jumps in not a GPU space, it'll be really interesting to see what sort of CPUs come out on top and where your systems are going to need to go. Because we see more Assassin's Creed Unities with like 500 NPCs or more Hitmans.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a Hitman game with bigger environments and more graphically intensive things is what I'm expecting a lot of games
That'll
will
be
be
awesome.
like.
Yeah.
And that is going to be, very interesting.
And the NPCs can also they can be doing more.
Yeah.
Because they're very static and don't do a whole lot in a lot of games when you've got a lot of them in particular. So it'd be interesting when you've got a whole lot of them and they're doing a whole lot of different things, like real life, like people go that.
The thing that's always bothered me with like GTA 5 is that, or games like that, is there's no setting where you can set a realistic traffic density. There's always like, you're driving on the freeway, there's like 3 cars. You're in this city and there's like 2 cars at a traffic light.
Tim's like, no, I want this to be a real simulation. I want to take 1 hour to get a block. It's like, that's what I call fun gaming. Just quickly, Soviet Bird said, Threadripper Gaming benchmarks seem to be all over the place on different channels. Is there anything that you did in particular that got you such great performance? Also, first Patreon live stream. Well, hopefully you're enjoying your first Patreon live stream. I noticed much the same. Gaming benchmarks are actually really hard to do properly. It takes a lot of time and I don't know if experience is the right word, but basically, if you set up a system quite poorly and then run Corona or something like that, it's pretty hard to lose. Say the 2950X does it in 74 seconds. Let's just say that. To make it do it in 76 seconds is pretty hard. Like, you can completely hack up the memory timings and it still will be within a second. It's pretty crazy. Like, a lot of those, we've seen it even when we do like memory tuning guides, and you'll get 20, 30% performance boosts with, like, say, a 3900X. But then you go run Cinebench or whatever, it's like, oh, you got a couple of extra points, or Corona doesn't even move. It's like the exact same result. So gaming benchmarks are really hard. You have to have the system set up perfectly, the software set up perfectly, everything, in check. And then it's just, it's more tricky to get accurate results. And I haven't seen a lot of examples of people who do good benchmarks for games. It just seems to be, like, even a Nantech, they're the gold standard of benchmarking or reviews. And no disrespect to them, but their gaming benchmarks are pretty weak. They're pretty bad, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think part of it comes from as well the choice of games that you make for testing, and that if you choose, like,
it's if the games where
if you choose a game from 5 years ago that was a single player title that no one's playing anymore, it's like, how representative of that of modern gaming? Like, if you take a title, like a very popular game that had a canned benchmark that everyone used was like Shadow of War, or before that, Shadow of Mordor. That was like, people used that for years for benchmarking. But realistically, how many people in 2019 are actually using their system to play that game? And how representative of that is of gaming in general? Because these days, like, even though that game is not that old, it was released, like 2 or 3 years ago, games are becoming more CPU intensive. They're becoming, they use the CPU better. They're more using modern APIs and using them properly, like better DirectX 12 implementations, better Vulkan implementations. And any game that's released these days is going to have those things factored in. Like, so whenever I see a whole suite of benchmarks, I tend to think, like, you can benchmark like a Battlefield 5 or a GTA 5, games that people are still playing today, but for those older single player titles that sort of people play when they launch and forget about, I tend to think, ideally those should be updated with today's single player popular title, or at least from like a year or two.
That was what I was going to add to it. So I hadn't really finished saying, like, elaborating on how it's difficult to test these games, and other reasons for why it's difficult is because, like, my eyes have been bloodshot for a week and a half now for a reason. Like, I don't know how many other tech reviewers are putting in the hours that we're putting in. I'm not sort of saying we do the best job or we put in the most time. I know, like, Steve from Gamers Nexus also does a lot. But I spent over a week updating all my game results to make sure that I was using the latest version of the game. They were all, same display drivers, same version of the game, to get as apples to apples comparison doesn't get. And I know a lot of tech sites, they'll run a game and they'll keep those results for 6-12 months, and there's probably like 5-6 major game updates that affect performance. So,
and it's not the driver update, it's the game update that makes the big difference.
Yeah, sure, but it can be most of the time it can be both. But there's a lot involved in getting accurate game results. It's just a huge amount of time has to be invested, and then, as I said, you have to have everything set up well. So it's just, results are going to vary massively, because if I kept my same results from even the 3rd gen Ryzen review, where I updated everything, then if I kept all those results and then didn't update games, and that's a big reason why you'll see people like a Nantech use really old games, because those games no longer get updates, and display driver updates don't affect performance in them. So testing with the latest games is a bit of a nightmare. It's one of the reasons why I didn't test with Red Dead, because that game's getting updated pretty rapidly at the moment.
Bit of a work in progress, that one. But I think, the thing that we try and do as much as possible is make sure that the results are representative of what you guys are going to get. And while I think that testing old games sort of has its place if you're just more interested in a synthetic style benchmark, like, I would say Shadow of War is no different to like a 3D mark these days in terms of its relevance for gaming. Sure. It's like, it does test the GPU, it's not really something that people are using today. Like, you can't actually game 3D mark. It's not a game. So, like, to put in the effort to retest everything with the latest game versions, the latest drivers, to test in-game generally as opposed to using canned benchmarks, I think hopefully that is providing the best representation of what you'll actually see when you're playing the game. Like, when you're running around on your system playing the latest titles, hopefully our results show that, as opposed to more of a synthetic style thing. And that's just, you have to sort of put in all the work. And I get really frustrated testing laptops because no one wants to let me keep a laptop for 6 months. So I'm in a situation where I have to sort of use those older results. And I try and update them as much as possible whenever I get systems in and use fresh data. But there's always a concern that when you have to set up benchmarks to use over a number of years, like I have to do for the laptop stuff, that eventually some of those things aren't going to be relevant. And especially moving into maybe a slightly different discussion, but when you sort of see from the user benchmark stuff about how they're sort of more weighting towards single core performance and sort of lower thread count performance because they think that's representative for modern applications. I've just gone through and retest a whole bunch of laptops, and there is no doubt that applications that weren't single-threaded 3 years ago or weren't multi-threaded 3 years ago now are multi-threaded.
Whoa.
It's like, who would have guessed this? Who would have guessed that as core counts increase and single-thread performance is inching up, the developers would be finding new ways to use multiple cores? And if you look across
even 2020 edition of Premiere has made a big step forward there, which I was shocked by because that's been notoriously bad for use of pretty much anything with more than about 6 cores.
Developers for software that people use every day and pay a lot of money for, like even stuff like Microsoft Office, it's like people pay money for this software and it's like a big thing businesses use. Of course, they are trying to get the best performance out of that. And if you compare like an old version of Excel to now, so many more of the functions are multi-threaded. Like old versions are horrendous.
Oh, yeah.
And you upgrade to something like, modern versions of Photoshop, many more of the filters are multi-threaded now. I just was going through and testing MATLAB. You can get like twice the performance using a new version because it's more multi-threaded. It's like apps are moving that way.
Well, they're moving that way a lot faster now that we haven't got quad cores as mainstream processors. A lot has changed in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
So
I think it's kind of ridiculous to say that like single thread is the dominant thing. It's like in some situations, but more and more apps are moving that way. More and more well-developed apps that people pay attention to and are improving.
Single thread's absurd. That's just a laughable statement to make. Even last year, like the 7600K is a pretty bad gaming CPU now. There's a lot of modern games where the stutter is horrendous.
Yep.
And we saw the Ryzen 5 60. If you had and I know that we had this conversation way back in mid 2017. If you were picking between the 7600K and the Ryzen 5 1600, the 7600K was miles faster in pretty much every game at the time. But when you've got 12 threads versus 4, it seemed like the 12-thread processor, which under realistic gaming conditions really wasn't that much slower. It was the 720p and 1080p results where it was a lot slower with a high-end graphics card. It seemed like that would be a better long-term investment, and that's certainly the case. Like, if you want to play Battlefield 5 today, or any of the other, like Assassin's Creed Odyssey or any games like that, the 7600K gets murdered for frame consistency anyway. Steve, have you fiddled with TCX overclocking in the latest BIOSes of a lot of X570 boards? I haven't. Probably something I would like to play with. Not super excited by overclocking on these parts, but it would probably be something interesting to look at. So, not high on my priority list. Probably want to do the memory tuning benchmarks well before that. But if things calm down, that would be something I would look at. I think we'll be pretty much set with content to see the year out. There'll be the RX 5500 in a couple of weeks, I would have thought. And then December, it's sort of like wrap-up stuff. I'll look at maybe doing like a best PC hardware video and a worst PC hardware video. I've got a couple of ideas of things for the worst PC hardware releases, like the MSI X570 Pro Carbon, a couple of 5700 XT graphics cards, and I don't know. I'll have to have a bit more of a think.
There, Cascade Lake X.
Well, yeah, maybe, yeah. Maybe I'll build a Cascade Lake X system, but I can't use the Pro Carbon board for that. So that sucks. Because that would be brilliant if I could. Maybe I'll try and find a really crap X299 board. I can't believe how bad that Gigabyte board handled the overclocking. I have not heard of ARM squeal in so many different tones. It was weird. I'll put the 10980XE back on it, overclock it. It couldn't do the 600 watt overclock, it just turned off straight away. And I'm not sure what setting you can use to override that, if that's advisable. But anyway, when it was at around 490 watts from the wall, I'll upload a video of the sounds this board made, because the fact that it was still working and making those sounds was remarkable. Yeah, but anyway, that was interesting. But yeah, I'll have to find a crap X299 board, and I would put the probably the 5700 XT Tough in it, the one with the 104 degree memory. But anyway, that might be some fun content for next month. What else have we got here? Thanks for the detailed answer to my question. Really appreciate how much effort you guys put into benchmarking. You're very welcome. Appreciate you guys supporting us in our efforts in benchmarking. I beg to differ. The apps that have no competition aren't putting effort into multi-threading beyond rendering. Namely Autodesk, Adobe. Yeah, I mean, like I said, Adobe 2020 is a huge improvement. I mean, I don't know what Adobe app you're talking about, but like Premiere has a lot of competition now.
Premiere, they've, people moving to DaVinci Resolve has made
them pull their thumb out.
Yeah, they're like, oh, hang on a moment. The GPU, wait, you can use that for things? It's like they've finally sort of realized this thing.
Well, even CPU usage is a lot better. Like,
yeah, 2020 is snappy. It's
a massive improvement.
There's a snappiness improvement to that app.
We'll get Jared from Jared's Tech to make a graph on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think Autodesk, some of their stuff, I think rendering is kind of a performance limiting factor if you're talking about 3D rendering. I'm not sure about the CAD apps because it's not something we've ever used really, or have a lot of familiarity with. But I
should have designed my shedding one.
And to be fair, there are still things that you can't make multi-threaded. So, for example, in Premiere, I'd find it. How they're going to make something like a warp stabilizer effect multi-threaded.
They don't need to, really. I mean, it'd be great if they did.
Yeah, but it's just about how to utilize that effect properly.
Well, I like that you can run many more instances simultaneously. So warp stabilization is this thing that just frame by frame analyzes the frame, and it can either add frames in to make an image smoother, or it can crop and manipulate the image. So I use it on all my B-roll, which is why a lot of our B-roll is quite smooth. I mean, it's fairly smooth to begin with, but any slight bump or knock you might notice, it gets rid of all of that. So it's really cool. But yeah, one instance on a fairly, maybe like a 20-second clip might take 5 to 10 minutes on a 9900K. And then on a 9900K, you can do, like maybe 8 instances at once, like 8 separate bits of B-roll, 8 different clips you can do. But with a Threadripper CPU, you can just select all the B-roll in one video and just hit it, which is great because it takes about the same amount of time. Well, it does it's faster, but what I'm saying is when you do them all at once, it takes the same amount of time, but you can go off and do something else or make a thumbnail or something. So that's good.
I think as well, there's a lot of apps like that where something that's single threaded doesn't mean that you have to just use that one thing at once.
No. And
sure, there might be some tasks that are single threaded, but it's also what is the key thing for performance with your system and in your workflow? It's like if something is single threaded, but it's like a task that takes a second, it's
it's not
does that matter versus a rendering task that takes 30 minutes, and where you really want to see the gains there would be bringing that down to 25-20 minutes.
That was always the editing versus encoding argument.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not 100% sure how those sort of the Autodesk type software works for those sort of things, but yeah, it just does depend on sort of what is your limiting thing and the things that you need to be looking for. And as someone that uses an app that has that issue of single thread versus multi-thread, which is Premiere, it's I would much rather my code take do this as opposed to my editing go oop, there it is.
So we've talked about that a lot, but 100% agree. Bowties FPV says, also, I got my laptop signed by all my favorite tech YouTubers at LTX 2019, but since you weren't there, I couldn't get yours. Will you ever be stateside so I can get your signatures for the collection? Man, my signature's a mess. I can barely hold a pen.
Mine is just a scribble, so I mean,
The signatures are such a weird thing. I was seeing the guys from Hardware Canucks do calligraphy. I'm holy crap. How long have you guys spent like practicing your signature with a pen?
Well, I think isn't it in North America, and you guys watching can correct me on this, but they've had their sign for paying for things system a lot longer than we have. Like, you know, these days you don't sign for anything. Like, except for parcels, like you don't go to the store and have to sign a little docket.
I mean, I don't. Like,
when was the last time you had to sign?
I'm
for
trying
for
to think the last time. Oh no, when I flew to Computex in New Zealand, I had to fill out the little form.
Oh yeah,
and mine looks like a child did it.
Yep.
Like, I had better handwriting in like grade 4 than I do now.
It's just maybe in America it's like because you have to sign those things so often because they were so slow to get like tap and pay for paying for things, or even the chip insert. Like maybe people are like, oh, I've got to get my fancy signature.
Yeah.
Whereas here it's like, man, I just.
Yeah, most deliveries I don't even have to sign for because the delivery drivers know me really well.
Yeah.
They just do it. Or when I do it, they just give me like, and it's on a tablet thing. So I'm just like, remember when I had to do the thing at Computex to get the SIM card for the prepaid?
Oh yeah. It's like you're like, what's a signature?
Like the closest I get to holding a pen is a Sharpie when I like draw a line on a bit of tin before I'm going to cut it. Like it was, embarrassing. So yeah, I don't know if you want me signing your laptop. Maybe we'll have to have some practice signatures before we go over there. But to answer the question, yeah, we'd like to attend LTX. It looks like a lot of fun. I don't know if we're able to make it next year, but maybe the year after.
Because we don't do a lot of flying, we sort of just pass off. Like we're not attending CES 2020, for example, and we just sort of stick to Computex. Whenever we get requests to do things, it's kind of like if there's flying involved, we're like, But I really would like to, if it's possible, get to LTX 2020. It just depends on sort of what the budgeting is like for that, and also the release schedule of products. Because if LTX is like in a time when there's a lot of releases, we'd prefer to prioritize the releases. Where if it's in like a really slow period and we know it's going to be pretty slow, then doing like a week in the US to attend something like that could work. So it just depends on I'm just. Yes, it sounds like people in the US are saying that even when you use the chip, you still have to sign, which is just... How is a signature a valid security method?
I have no idea.
It's like...
It's the dumbest thing
competent humans can look at an image of a signature and they might not be able to do it quickly, but slowly copy that.
Yeah.
And it's like, because it's an exposed thing, like it's on the back of your credit card or whatever, it's like if someone has access to that, they can quite easily just at least do a few practice runs to sort of imitate your signature a few times. Whereas if you have my card, how are you supposed to know my PIN?
It's weird.
It's like, unless I tell you, you're not going to be able to use my thing.
It's a weird one.
So, yeah, I just...
Oh, man, I'm miles behind in the chat here.
Yeah. PIN is too many numbers for us to remember. So, I always found that weird going to the US, the sort of how behind their payment systems were. Whereas these days, it's like...
surprises me.
Any purchase in Australia under $100, we've been able to tap our card, not do anything for years.
Now, yeah.
Like, I've been doing it for 5 years plus. And like people always say like, oh, Apple Pay or the equivalent like tap your phone payment system, how revolutionary it is. And it's like, I think...
That's just a chance to smash your phone.
It's like having attempted to use that, it is worse and slower than pulling out my card and tapping it.
Like these
you have
days,
to have your phone configured. You have to tap your fingerprint on your phone.
I think for the first year
it.
or so of it as well, you sort of had to hold the card in the right. You had to orange it the right way, and then you had to like wait a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
Now it's just like boom, done.
Now it's like I don't even finish tapping before it's validated.
It just beeps instantly. Oh,
and it's like it's so quick for me to pull out my wallet and get my card out and tap it that pulling out my phone and doing all that stuff is slower and isn't revolutionary, because by the time it launched here, everyone had already been tapping their cards for years. So it's like, oh, whatever, who cares?
The downside is, though, I can't hold a pen.
Well,
but I can pay for my meal significantly faster.
Yeah.
And my Nando's that we're going to get soon.
So.
Getting back to the Threadripper just for a moment. I had, this might interest the guys watching. So after the Threadripper reviews went live, the day after anyway, my AMD contact rang me and we had a bit of a discussion about the reviews and things like that. And I said to him, so having seen how the 39 60X and 3970X panned out. Was I right about the 2990WX being a subpar kind of crappy product? And there was just silence for like 20 seconds. He was like, he wanted to say yes, but he couldn't say yes. But he said, I think you said it best. The 2990WX was a niche product. And I said, yeah, a very niche product. But the reason I didn't like the 2990WX, and I think we were probably, I don't know, were we more critical, more harsh of the 2990WX than most people?
I think a lot of people there weren't too many positive reviews. There was a lot of lukewarm reception to it.
I think people were a bit confused, thinking it should be better than it was.
Can I predict what you're going to say saying that the 2990WX was bad because you couldn't figure out whether your workload would be good on it or not?
Well, I don't even know if I was going to get there, but yeah, I mean, that was
my main issue with that.
Oh, yeah, sure, yes.
You can't look at benchmarks and know whether the 2990WX fit into the good, like this runs it really well, or this will run it like really bad.
Okay, yeah, that's basically where I was going to get. It was more, yeah, essentially you didn't know if it was going to be chart topping or completely broken.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. So that was the problem with the 2990WX. And imagine if you bought a 2990WX in like the last 6 months.
Oh, you'd be devastated.
Not only are you locked into a dead platform.
Yeah. X399's done. You can't put in your much faster processor.
Like, the 3960X is like $400 cheaper to this day. I don't know what availability is like. I'd hate to look. But soon it will be available. And it's $400 cheaper and it's miles faster and everything. And then don't even talk about the 32-core model. But yeah, the 2990WX just sucked. And basically, I didn't give it a great review. And I'm now very pleased that I didn't. Because
it's obviously a much better design. I think...
Yeah.
And AMD would have realized this from their Epic products. Of customers getting them and being like, hang on a moment. Surely there's a better way to deal with this. And the IO die design, I think, is definitely going to be the way forward for not just this product, but all sorts of products. Intel is going to, I'm sure, have some sort of system like this, and the sort of chiplet things are going to be quite popular, even with GPUs. So it's going to be very interesting to see how all that stuff goes.
There goes the garbage truck. Splash and Mash says, have you fellas heard any rumors or speculation about next AMD flagship GPU? Not really. Sort of mixed things here and there, but definitely nothing coming. Well, I shouldn't say definitely because I have no idea. I'm confident nothing is coming before year's end, and I'm pretty confident nothing's coming early next year.
Yeah, from the sounds of it at the moment, the big thing that will be AMD's next launch at CES will be the APU products. So Zen 2 plus Navi.
They're going to be awesome, I think.
Well, yes, because I think they get helped a lot with their APUs because that APU is going to be the console design as well. So they get not only... They've designed Zen 2 really well, Navi's pretty good, and then they're going to get a whole bunch of help from like what Microsoft and Sony want in a massive product for them to sort of make that a really compelling and fast, and not only that, but it has to last a long time. So I think the APU is going to be really compelling, especially for mobile products. So I think that'll be their next launch, and it doesn't sound like there's too much high-end stuff going on the GPU front, at least until the next generation.
Obviously, we're getting the 5500. I think we'll probably get a 5600 series early-ish next year. Guessing, no idea. And I think like a lot of people have been asking me about B550. I'm predicting that will be like a Computex launch for 2020. So that's quite a way off. I'm not expecting B550 early next year, and I'm certainly not expecting it by the end of this year. So next month.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like there was too much, need for the B550 platform.
Not really.
Especially because it wasn't going to bring PCIe 4.
It'd be nice if there was more good quality B450 boards.
True.
Like, we almost need a second wave of, I suppose, like X570 boards, the lower end ones, like some of the Asus ones are pretty good, and they're under $200 US, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Am I the only one who likes HEDT just because it stacks RAM on both sides? I just love RGB RAM on both sides.
It's a good reason.
Yep. You're probably not the only one, to be honest. What's the price? Nori says, what's the price of the 2990WX right now? Yeah, it's still $1,800 US, which was the launch price. So do not buy a 2990WX. The 2990WX, realistically, I mean, it can't even $1,000. I wouldn't pay for one.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to buy into a dead platform too, and you had $1,000, like, and you had to get something that was the fastest for that amount, wouldn't you buy a 10980XE? Like, as much as that's not a good product, it's like it has all the drawbacks. It's a dead platform, you know.
Well, you get a 2950X, obviously.
Yeah.
George says, I think the excitement over the call count on the 2990WX overcame an evaluation of its actual value for reviewers.
I think part of that is a bit, at least partly true. You know, first time 32
We
cores
were
comes to a
super
desktop.
excited about that, the announcement of that product, and we were itching big time to build. Tim and I had planned, we were hassling AMD big time. We'd planned on building a pair of 2990WX editing rigs, and we were super excited about it. When I got the chip and it landed for review like a week or so ahead of the actual review, I was like, oh my God, I can't wait. I chucked in, the first thing I ran was Premiere, and it was just a dog's breakfast. It was miles slower than everything else, even like 6-core processors. And I was like, what? I did something wrong. What have I done wrong? Oh man, that was like an hour of disappointment trying to work that out. Yeah, basically my entire review process was trying to work out why it was crap in so many workloads. Also, is the 2920X for $300, is that a good deal? Yeah, that's a pretty awesome processor if you sort of like a budding content creator. 12-core, 24-thread for $300 US. That's pretty good.
That's good. Yep.
And you can get X399 boards brand new. There's ASRock have one that's relatively cheap. And that's one of the problems with this whole TR4, TRX40 issue. Most of the TR4 boards are pretty crap. So Asus's Do-Over board, the Zenith 2 Extreme, whatever it was, that's pretty good. The MSI, what was it? The Creation, that was good. And that was about it. Like the ASRock Taichi was pretty average. The Gigabyte Aorus Extreme wasn't very extreme. That board, it's okay, but not great. So there aren't many good X399 boards for like a 2990WX if you want to overclock or do something crazy like that. Whereas the TRX40 boards all look pretty insane. I haven't really delved into them yet. I'm going to do a VRM comparison, but they look significantly better. Of course, they're way more expensive.
Yeah, and I mean, they have to handle the 64-core CPU as well, so...
That's right, whereas none of these boards will do... I mean, a lot of these X399 boards will struggle with like the 3970X, let alone the 64-core model. So the ASRock Phantom Gaming, the X399 Phantom Gaming 6, I think it is, that's $230 on Newegg right now. So that board with a $300 12-core processor, that's a pretty awesome combo.
Yep.
For a brand new system, anyway. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Brand new.
Does the 3990X 64-core processor make any sense for anyone besides overclockers? Sure, it'll perform well, but it'll probably cost $4,000 and suck down more power than a Vega mining farm if overclocked. I actually don't think it'll be
any more
useful
power
for overclocking at all.
I don't think it'll be that power hungry either. I think it'll be like a 39 to 3950X situation. Could be wrong, but I'm thinking that's what it'll be.
Didn't you see that already a little bit with the going from the 24 to the 32? In terms of the power consumption wasn't that much higher?
Yes, but that's... Yeah.
Yeah.
Clock speeds and stuff, obviously.
I think the 64 core will probably require more power.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be the same power as the 32 core. That would be ridiculous.
No. It will be a bit more, but what I'm saying is I think it'll be a similar situation. To
Yeah,
what
it
we
won't
saw.
be. I don't think it'll be 2x the power requirement.
Yeah.
But for
There's no way it'll be 800 watt system. Well, no, that wouldn't even be right anyway because I'm calculating the whole system.
Yeah.
But basically, you'd be looking at like 600 watt total system at least.
does this make any sense to anyone besides overclocks? Of course, it will make sense. Like content creators,
Makes
like if you're in a Hollywood studio
Sure.
and you are rendering like your 3D models for your Pixar movies or whatever, do you think they care about a $4,000 price?
Yeah.
You know how much some camera gear costs?
Yeah.
Like you can buy $200,000 cinema lenses.
No, it's
like
massive.
$4,000 is like how much stock can we get? Can we buy 1,000 of these for all our editors? Like that will be flying off the shelves for those people. And even if it's not twice as fast as the $2,000 32 core, and you're only getting say 50% more, even like
50% is massive.
but even like 30% more for
They'll-
$2,000 more,
they'll-
that will be
Yeah.
selling. They won't be able to make enough of those parts for that market.
Yeah, because the most expensive thing for them is the person sitting in front of the computer.
Yeah, the content they're making costs so much more than the price of the hardware they're using.
But also the
Like,
labor involved.
yeah, it's like a shot could cost them $100,000
Yeah.
for like the actors and the things they're using, the set elements. Like
So
the price
for,
of our editing rig is nothing.
so for
compared to
industry
that.
professionals, 100% it's going to be game changing.
Yeah.
For us, no.
Yeah,
I mean, it'd be
Hobbyists,
nice.
It's not a hobbyist product.
No, it'd be nice, but realistically in Premiere, it's going to be probably no. Well, if it's faster than the 3970X, it'll be mere seconds.
Yeah,
So,
so it's definitely.
having
yeah,
said
something
that,
for
I
that.
can't wait to test it out.
And I think because of the lack of, like, it doesn't have as many of the weaknesses that the 2950X had with like your single core performance, your sort of memory access and that sort of thing, and obviously much more PCIe lanes. Like, it being that golden all-rounder product that is just fast at everything means that, you know, it should fly off the shelves for content creators having to upgrade anything. Like, if you've been on Intel's HDD platform, like a lot of people probably have been because of the single core performance and those advantages, like they're going to be moving a lot of those. And I wouldn't be surprised if it maybe not sells out, but certainly when they do their deals for studios and for, you know, the big deals like that, that they'll be selling a lot of those, and Epic as well, which I'm sure they're already sort of servicing creators with sort of
Yeah, I
server
imagine clock
solutions.
speed's more of an issue for Epic for that sort of
Yeah.
stuff, though. But yep. Bowtie says the 2990WX is about $1,600 US still. Probably will drop very soon. Yeah, I think it's $1,800 on Newegg and $1,700 on Amazon, but it's probably cheaper elsewhere. But even, yeah, $1,600. Like, yeah, if you knew it was good for your workload, like maybe $1,000 would be worth spending on it. Boy, I'm miles behind the chat here. B550 will be MSI's redemption for the X570 bad boards. Yeah, I've spoken to MSI and they reckon they're going to kick it out of the park with B550s. No indication of when that will be.
Well, the Tomahawk was such a big seller for them, being a very high quality product.
Yeah, I don't know how they made that mistake with X570, but yeah, I've had a few meetings with the motherboard guys from MSI and they tell me VRM is going to be a huge focus of their future products. I don't know why it wasn't for X570. That's a different kind of question, but anyway.
Do you think that
Where are you up to?
I'm reading the
No,
latest questions?
I'll just let you
Okay.
do it.
This is an interesting thing. I think, yeah, I read on the internet that movie studios edit at 1080p and then upscale to higher resolutions. What is stopping YouTubers from doing the same thing instead of wasting time rendering?
I think quite a few guys do. Hardware Canucks do that, I think.
Yeah,
You don't
that
need to.
has
though.
its advantages. I think a lot of movie studios are now moving beyond sort of 1080p editing and rendering and are actually doing the native 4K work because 4K TVs are more popular and 4K Blu-rays are a thing. So when movie studios come to like mastering their content, they always try and choose the format that makes the most sense, because obviously if you do 4K, it adds a lot of cost to your production. So they want to choose a target that is going to make sense for displaying on the big screen, displaying at home. And why would you bother making your content 4K if cinemas aren't 4K and at home no one's going to be able to watch it at that? But I think more and more that's going to become a thing.
I tried doing the editing stage in 1080p, and the problem with that is like when I was doing like the highlighting bars on the graphs, they were off by quite a few pixels because of the blur, and I couldn't work out what the offset was. So, and it 4K works fine anyway.
I think a lot of ways that can be overcome to sort of speed up editing if you're working with really high resolution projects is you can use intermediary files. So you edit with a 1080p copy, but when it goes to render, it takes the footage from your 4K source and it renders it out in 4K.
Yeah.
And obviously with a lot of visual effects, they're sort of moving towards doing stuff like that. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if, that becomes less of an issue. Here's another interesting question. Do you think there's any chance NVIDIA will expand support for HDMI 2.1 variable refresh on LG TVs, or is there something about ensuring that Pascal doesn't have?
Oh, I'll answer that one.
It seems like NVIDIA's doing a lot of good stuff with G-Sync, which is a surprise because, they've been hammered for it being an expensive closed platform. But I heard the other day that the latest G-Sync modules support FreeSync. So like they've completely changed their module, so it's no longer proprietary,
Yeah,
which is.
we always knew they were going to quietly do that.
I mean, they're going to have to do it, don't they?
I said this to you. Remember we went to Nando's like 2 years ago,
Yeah.
and I said to you, this is definitely what they're going to do quietly.
Yeah, because
And
they have to. There's no.
I didn't see that as an option for them not
like-
to.
The issue that they are facing with TVs is that like TVs are introducing variable refresh rate, not only because it's an industry standard now, but next gen consoles are going to support variable refresh rate, and probably a lot more games are going to be, well, at least I'm hoping, fingers crossed, not be capped to 30 FPS because that's such a garbage experience that like Nvidia can't just go around and be like, hey, we don't support variable refresh for TVs, because like if more and more high-end TVs come with this feature and Nvidia's locked themselves out because they've gone down this G-Sync path for so long, that they're going to have to start supporting it, and that's basically what they're doing. You know, I mean, they might do some more brand hijacking, like it's not HDMI 2.1 support; it's the TVs support G-Sync and have it the other way around. But at the end, At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're a consumer and it just works with your product and it works with the competitor's product. Who cares what they call it? It's like doesn't matter.
I love how you use Just Works.
Well, they're fixing a lot of that stuff, which is good. And I think it's harsh for people to give Nvidia a hard time for some of the stuff they're doing there, because they went down a path that sucked for a long time, but now they're actually making it good. And I think you can't. It's too harsh to go and criticize a company for fixing problems and making
I
stuff
think people
decent.
don't cut them slack because they went down a path of making more money.
Well, I guess, but like.
Like, they were like, no, we're going to make this difficult for everyone. We're going to cut you off and we're going to charge you. And, you know, GeForce owners had to pay heaps more for monitors. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, actually that strategy didn't work, so we're just going to flip-flop on that one.
Yeah, that does suck, but I think you can't.
All I'm saying
is it's harsh to then go and say, Nvidia's doing this now. It's like, well, they're still shit because they're
Yeah, I'm not. Well, that doesn't make sense. But that's all. I think that's why it leaves a bit of a bad taste in people's mouths. It's the same reason why, Nvidia keep complaining that they're getting punished for ray tracing. It's like, no, that's not it. It's because you told people you have to have an RTX graphics card or the gaming experience is going to be subpar. And it's going to, revolutionize gaming and all this kind of crap they went on about. Then they gave a 1 month pre-order period to suck people in. And now we're, more than a year? And there's like one okay-ish game.
Yep. I mean, Nori says here, it matters when there's a $200 tax for the G-Sync tax. Yeah, that's old news now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
The G-Sync module doesn't exist. Well, I mean, they claim it still is a thing, but really you don't see monitors with that in it anymore. So it's not really a concern these days.
Yeah, no, but it's kind of like if I screw you over and charge you too much for something, and then you come back later and like, oh, I'll look after you now on the price. You're like, well, I'm still pissed off about that first time you rolled me. I'm like, well, get over it because I'm not going to do it again.
Yeah, I guess.
So that's kind of the situation.
But I think that's just a situation where it's like a bad idea and a bad product at the time is always a bad idea and a bad product.
With Nvidia, the idea was always to make more money off their customer base, which I get they're a company, but they're like, we could offer this free solution to make our products better, but let's make this, and probably oversimplifying it because I know the G-Sync module was better in a lot of ways, so yeah, I'll probably stop there because I was probably going to oversimplify the situation.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know that there's been the whole competition thing and everything like that, but I mean, the competition thing has been a thing for years. It's not like they've suddenly, now we've got competition, we have to change it.
Yeah.
It's like they were gung-ho on doing that for a long time.
Yeah, it was just a bad idea.
Yeah, it was a bad idea from the start. I mean, sure, for the first few years, G-Sync was significantly better than FreeSync. Mm-hmm. But nowadays, when the high refresh monitors are sort of, ubiquitous, it's...
Yeah, like 2 years
they
ago.
were never going to have won that battle.
Yeah, I know. 2 years ago, and I haven't been following it that closely, but I sort of asked you for your opinion on it. I said, I don't see the end, this doesn't have an end game for them, apart from, hey, we got FreeSync now. And that's pretty much how
Yeah, and the reality is that the way I sort of think of it is that, NVIDIA had the better product to begin with and they made it proprietary, which is, sure, on them. There's no way I guess you sort of think like, well, they couldn't have guaranteed that an AMD card would work with their hardware that they've made. Like, they can't just go and say, hey, AMD, we're working on this. Please make your GPUs like this.
I just think it's the same way they approach everything. It's like NVIDIA invented ray tracing.
Yeah.
They put all the research and development into making ray tracing, so we should thank Nvidia and buy their products for ray tracing.
Yeah, I mean,
It's like that's the story they're selling you.
they're trying to do that. But I think when it comes to them, they've made a module that worked the best at the time and was required. They had to make it proprietary because, there was no way an AMD card would run their custom solution for this.
They could have left the option open.
Well, I mean, AMD could reverse engineer it, I guess, but they had a good solution at the time. There had to have been a time at some point where Nvidia ditches it, and it's going to have to happen at some point. And I think it's hard. I find it hard to criticize them because they had to do it at some point.
So will we see a similar thing with ray tracing where the tensor cores and that just get ditched
Perhaps.
and they just use the same method of ray tracing?
I'm imagining that is probably going to happen.
That's why
the other thing is AMD might go the other way and actually introduce their own ray tracing cores. So we don't know what's going to happen with RDNA there. But whenever there's these proprietary things, there has and there's a free and open standard, it becomes an industry standard. There has to be a point where the company that pushed the boundaries and did it first and made the proprietary solution, they have to ditch it. And I think when that happens, you can't be too harsh on them for doing it because it was inevitable and it's better for everyone.
I wonder how much of this is damaging these companies long term. Because I'm shocked by the love and support for AMD. Like, I know AMD fanboys have always been quite prolific, but like the people that are just jumping behind AMD now they've got a good product and just shitting on Intel because they've done locked CPUs, locked platforms, all that kind of stuff that people have had enough of over the years. And everyone's sort of cheering the downfall of Intel on, whereas I don't really want Intel. I want them to stay relevant so we have competition and AMD's fighting hard to take them on. And I wonder if AMD comes back on Nvidia or Intel jumps in the mix. I'm not too confident about that one, but whether, if things start going AMD's way on the GPU front, it'll turn around really quickly as well because people are sick of this kind of crap. I don't know.
The way I always think of this is that, you should never be a fanboy of a company because companies in dominant market positions always do the same things, and companies that are in minority positions always do the same things. Your underdog company is always doing the good guy stuff.
Sure, yeah.
Because the only way they can compete is to do good guy stuff. So unlocking all your CPUs, having really good value products, doing FreeSync, doing all that stuff was around because they're an underdog, right?
Whenever I bring this up with AMD, they swear black and blue they're not going to run the industry the way Intel did if they get the chance. And I
doubt it.
I doubt it too.
It's as soon as a company pushes across into the dominant position, suddenly it's like, well, we don't need to do all that stuff anymore because we're in the market position.
Yep.
And what I think we'll see is that AMD, they're sort of doing a little bit now with their higher prices, but we'll start to see them doing more things that Intel has been criticized for, more expensive products, price premiums.
Like the Wraith Spire or whatever goes from having a copper base to no copper base to the fin stacks now shrunk down and the fan speeds turned up twice as fast. And
if Intel can't release a good quality 10 nanometer product that has new architectures and is competitive and is efficient and all that, what are they going to be able to do in the next couple of generations? It is make their products cheaper, make their products unlocked out of the box, make them good overclockers, unlock the platform so they're not you are going to see Intel do a lot of these things that AMD has done, and if they're in the underdog status, they will do a lot of those things. What do you think Intel is going to do with their GPUs? Are they going to come in and suddenly act like they're a dominant market player in GPUs and are they going to have Intel Sync for monitors? Are they going to have proprietary ray tracing? Of course not. They're going to be sucking up to gamers as hard as they can. They're going to be doing all the open source stuff.
Yeah.
It's just the way of life.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested to see how things do progress over the next few years. But not that Intel's down and out by any stretch of the imagination. They're just a process node away from serious pain for AMD. So
I mean, someone brings up the point here. So you look at Microsoft in the last 5 years with all their open source efforts. It's like, I think a lot of that stuff is more token stuff. If you look at the Windows platform, it's like that is a dominant position and it sucks. Like there's a lot of problems with Windows that
Could be a lot better.
they, if they were in an underdog status up against another competitor, would be putting a lot more effort into. And they wouldn't be doing stuff like a Windows 8, for example, if they're in a minority position. There's no way they would ever be able to get away with that and survive as a company. So, yeah, it'd actually be funny thinking about, like, if Microsoft was in, like, an AMD position and they released Windows 8, they probably would have gone under. That's how bad that software update was.
Well, AMD survived the FX processor, so they, anything's possible. How long have we been going for here?
1 hour and 5 seconds.
Oh, we've done the hour. Shut it all down. If you guys have any other questions or topics you want us to discuss, probably now is the time to get those in. There's always a million things I want to discuss, but I always forget when they are.
I always love talking about the fanboy stuff because we're seeing a changing of the guard now, and I'm going to be very interested to see what happens to the people that have, been the champions of AMD for 10, 15 years, and to see how AMD reacts to being in a dominant market position and what happens to those people if they start doing less favorable things in their position.
Well, at the moment, they're in the celebrating too hard phase. So we'll see what happens when they get to that next stage. But yeah.
Yeah, it certainly is
there's always
interesting there.
There's always something to be to fanboy, isn't there? TRX40 motherboard sweet spot. Yeah, the one you can afford. TRX40 motherboard pricing, like, realistically, you're probably just going to buy, like, the $700 model. If you're spending at least $1,400 on a CPU, up to $2,000, $4,000.
You're decking out your platform, aren't you? You're getting all the good stuff.
Like, yeah. Although I'm very, very, very impressed with what they've achieved with Threadripper, it's not like we're like, no, this is the must-have platform. It's, it is what it is. Obviously, I wouldn't be, I don't know if this is fair to say or not, but perhaps I wouldn't be as thrilled with Threadripper 3rd Gen and its current pricing if I wasn't so thrilled with, like, the Ryzen 5 3600. And
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
If there wasn't a 3950X offering, your sort of enthusiast, hobbyist creator or sort of your non-professional user that needs a lot of that sort of performance, AMD would be leaving a fairly significant gap in the market between your $500 mainstream processor and then your $1,400. Like, that's a big gap to fill without having a competitive product. So
yeah, what was it the 1650? God, I can't remember now. What was Intel's 10-core Broadwell E-part? What was that thing again? Someone put it in chat. It's hurting my brain trying to think. Anyway, their 10-core Broadwell E-part, that landed at, I think, $1,700 US.
Is that like the 6950?
Yeah, 6950X, that's it.
Yep.
You beat the chat.
Anyway, the chat is a little bit behind because of the delay.
But okay. There's probably going to be a heap pop up now.
Yeah.
That's true. It's like a 20-second delay. But anyway, at least we got it. That thing was like $1,700 US, and from memory, I didn't appreciate that. That wasn't too well received because their mainstream desktop stuff was just rehashed, refreshed crap, and at that point, the milking was very obvious. What else do we have here, Tim?
Anything you guys can talk about that's not under NDA when it comes to the RX 5500? I don't think we're under any NDAs for that because we don't have one.
There's no NDA for it, and we know it's coming.
Well, the OEM version's already out. So
it's definitely coming in December. There's no way there won't be AIB cards in December. So it's hitting shelves in December. I would think somewhere in the first half, early. What are we? Yeah.
You're both taking some holidays over the Christmas period.
What are those?
Yeah.
I might go fishing once. Nah, this time of year isn't a relaxing time for me.
Until it gets up to Christmas Day, it's kind of like...
Yeah, that's just more work. I've got 2 kids, so...
Suck on that.
Oh, I do. My next holiday is in March of next year.
Yeah, I'll be going late January.
Okay. So that's that.
So we have to plan. We have to sort of like look at the release calendar and be like, where can we slot in some time that we are fairly hopeful there won't be any major things happening. And it's like
it's like Russian roulette.
yeah, but it's always hard because like I think about my January holiday and it's like okay, that could be good, but you never know what's going to be announced at CES. So
Joey the Saint said, I don't think Steve and Tim remember to set chat to live chat.
No, we're seeing all the chat.
Maybe.
Maybe you weren't. Mine's
No.
definitely on live chat. I'm seeing.
So what did we
everything.
miss?
I think we're just
What did we miss?
going into more in-depth answers on these questions as opposed to answering like every single question because there are lots of questions.
Plenty of chat questions, not many answers. Oh, okay.
Do motherboard OEMs think fin heatsinks are ugly? Is it the only reason they don't use them? Is it maybe because they're more expensive?
I
to
heard
produce?
because they were more expensive.
Yeah,
It's just easier to make a slab and stick it on there than actually putting in. Yeah.
I would think
So
so.
I think it's a. Yeah, when I gave them a hard time about it, they were like, it doesn't make any difference. Like, it still runs within spec, and basically they were trying not to say this is cheaper. So we're just putting the cheapest thing that runs within spec. It's like, oh, okay, Intel. But that's it. I think it's price. I think it's price. And also, I think they feel that the angled slabs of aluminium are more aesthetically pleasing and therefore will generate more sales. So I think they're cheaper and look pretty. I think that's what it's all about.
Do you have an explanation for 30 FPS on PC when you lock it? Is it not as smooth as when we play 30 FPS on console? 30 FPS is always more jerky on the PC. Why is that?
Is it?
I think it's motion blur.
Yeah.
Console games, they're just like that motion blur dial. Let's crank that up to maximum.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of PC gamers hate motion blur, and if you play without motion blur at 30 FPS, it is janky.
Just
it is
set
like
your- just-
slideshow.
Set your monitor refresh rate to 30 hertz and try and use your mouse in Windows.
Yeah, it's like ooh,
it's like, is my
it's
computer
so
having a
sluggish.
seizure?
The input lag, and it's like I said it earlier in this live stream, but like if console developers suddenly have this magical epiphany that like gaming above 30 FPS is way better, then hopefully that'll happen with the next generation.
Yeah.
And especially like I think I've seen with a lot of videos from people like Digital Foundry where they say like if you have an unlocked frame rate for a console game, it can be not particularly smooth because you're running into like either tearing or VSync issues. Like if you're running at 40 FPS on a 60 FPS monitor without your adaptive sync, it's pretty unstable and feels quite bad to play, which is why a lot of developers lock it at 30 or 60 because it's like a consistent experience. And the guys at Digital Foundry are always talking about like making it a consistent and nice experience. But if you're a console developer with an adaptive, like if they're supporting adaptive sync, there's no reason why you can't have a game run at like 40 to 50 FPS on an adaptive sync monitor and have a pretty good experience. Like adaptive sync is good and makes games a lot more fluid. Like sure, if you're running at 80 FPS and you drop down to 40, you're going to be like, whoa, my God, that's like,
What happened?
What happened there? But if even like mild fluctuations with a good monitor that's showing you the frames immediately, I don't think is a janky experience at all. So yeah, I hope that happens in the future.
Rex says, I have a 3600X CPU, a B450 motherboard, doesn't specify which one, a 2080 Ti GPU, holy crap, that's RM850 power supply. My PC sometimes boots up and the CPU will only run at 0.8 instead of, so is he saying 800 megahertz instead of 4.2 gigahertz? Reset and it fixes it for a couple of days. That's odd.
Might need a few. Make sure you're running the latest drivers and stuff there.
Yeah, I mean,
Be going through and doing like fresh installs and all that.
it's not your CPU. So it's either the motherboard BIOS. I assume you've been updating your BIOS. Maybe you can do a follow-up comment there. Not sure what motherboard, what B450 board you have and the BIOS version. But I would be probably looking at your motherboard. Having said that, sometimes boots up. I doubt it's a Windows problem.
No, I don't think so.
And if it's running at 800 megahertz, I imagine like it takes forever to load into Windows and do stuff. Like that's ridiculously low. So it's not just a reporting error, is it? Anyway, we'll maybe follow up on that one.
I have an important question. What are you getting at Nando's?
Oh, geez, I haven't been to Nando's for ages.
Yeah, because we used to always smash it when you came here, but I've been going to your place for the
I've
past
had
6
it
months.
once since then, but I'll probably get like a half chicken,
Yep,
barbecue chicken and chips.
nice. I always go with the burgers. They good.
Yeah, I might get a burger as well. Hey, we'll see.
Do both.
I haven't had it for a while, so I might go all out. I'll put a photo in Discord so you guys can get the final answer.
Which is better, NVIDIA ultra low latency on or cap the frame rates? Well, we saw from the previous testing that it kind of depends how much of an advantage you get with input latency with the frame rate, with the frame caps. It depends on the game, depends on the situation. But ultra low latency also has the issue where it just reduces your frame rate in a lot of situations. So you turn on to get lower latency, but your frame rate might drop by 10 or 20 FPS if you're running above 100 FPS. So personally, I think unless you're playing a really latency sensitive game, you shouldn't do either of those things. The only thing I would recommend is doing the frame cap a few frames below your maximum refresh rate using like RTSS or something like that. That tends to give you the smoothest and most responsive experience. Like if you have a 144 Hz monitor and you cap it at 143 FPS, that gives you a really good experience because you're not running into VSync. So that is what I tend to recommend for the best and smoothest experience if you're doing any sort of capping and all that.
Fair enough. I'm just looking. Well, yeah, I don't know if Rex is running the latest BIOS, but that would be something to look into. There's a few different versions of the Prime, but they all have a pretty average VRM. It's a 4-phase VRM, but with the 3600X, it should be okay. Anyway,
we seriously need to get sponsorship money from Nando's. Everyone knows that we love Nando's, and where's my shill money? We're shilling Nando's hard. And
see the RTX boxes. Get some Nando's stickers and put them over the RTX. I laughed at Tim when I got here. I'm like, oh, Tim, you're bloody shilling with your RTX boxes.
And the funny thing is, like, people always say that I didn't have any Radeon boxes. I've always actually had this 5700 XT box here.
You got to move it over there.
It's been in the back, not on the sides.
Yeah. And it's at the top because it's number one. It's in pole position.
Yeah.
So there you go. That has to be there for your next video now. There'll be a conspiracy about that changing as well. Yep. For gaming, 2700X or 3600. Right now, 3600 is probably going to give you a better experience. It's one of those things though. Like refer back to my. Actually, that's what I need to do. I need to add the 2600 or the 2700, doesn't matter, to my ultimate gaming benchmark thing where I did all the different resolutions and presets.
Yep.
Because I think under realistic gaming conditions with like up to say an RTX 2070 Super maybe, there'll be no difference between either CPU. So you're probably better off with the 2700X for the extra cores, but then the latency improvements of the I don't know.
Depends on the price as well.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
What's the 2700X going
I think it really comes down to the fact that you can't go too wrong with either.
Yeah, there's most combinations, like most configurations that people game with, the CPU's like, eh.
Yeah, as long as the CPU is sufficient, it doesn't really matter too much.
Yeah, as long as you're not using like a dual core.
And that's why the 1900K really only makes sense today if you're going all out with like an RTX 2080 Ti.
You're playing 1080p.
Well, yeah.
You got a 1080p 240 Hz monitor, get your 9900K.
Yeah. That's true. What else have we got here? I think... Are we all caught up? Have we missed anyone's question? I think there's been a few storage questions here, but honestly, I'm not up to speed with storage stuff. I think someone was answering the storage question. Any recommendations for a 2TB Gen 3 x4 NVMe SSD? I'm using the Corsair MP. I think they're the 600s. They're good.
Yeah, I've got one in my test system.
They're good. I think... but... Yeah, I mean, probably go to someone who's done really good testing on that stuff because it's definitely not me. I've kind of lost interest in the SSD thing. You just get a good one and put it in, and it's worse than CPUs for gaming under realistic conditions because you could probably go get half a dozen different SSDs from reasonable brands, and are you going to notice a difference? I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. So that's why I haven't done any Gen 4 testing. I'll probably do something soon. Maybe I'll wait for like the second wave of PCIe Gen 4 SSDs and do some sort of like direct comparison. But yeah, a lot of people have been asking for the storage stuff, so maybe I'll start doing some storage benchmarks and some real world testing with them. But yeah, I'll have to try and get a bit excited about that one. There's a lot of benchmarking I'm excited to do. I just haven't had time. So anyway, what else have we got here? Rex says, mainly playing PUBG with the 2080 Ti and the 3600X at 1440p, 144Hz. How many FPS will I gain with, say, a 2700K or 900K? Not much would be the answer. Not enough to make the switch, I would say.
Yeah, it's a full platform change too, so...
Yeah. The 3600X is a bit of a beast for a gaming CPU. It's pretty much the same performance you get from like a 3950X for the most part. Or at least the 3900X. XFX Thick 3 review. I reckon they chickened out on that because they told me... Someone asked them about getting Hardware Unboxed one on Twitter, and they said, yeah, we've sent one. They emailed me and said they're definitely sending us one. I never got it. And then when I emailed them for a follow-up, they're like, oh, haven't you got it yet? I'm like, could I have the tracking information? And never heard anything else. So I'm not sure what's going on with that, but it's probably getting too late now. The Liquid Devil thing, I'm supposed to have that as well. That's the new power color. Anyway, whatever. I might test that. We'll see. I don't think anyone's too excited for any more 5700 XT reviews at this point.
Yeah.
I have 17 2080 Ti's in Crossfire. That's impressive in on itself. Should I stick to 720p gaming? Probably.
You're going to be getting some super high frame rates on
If you put them in SLI, you could probably do 1080p. You're going to melt some B350 and X570 boards with the 3950X. Well, it won't melt them. It'll just heavily throttle on them and reduce performance. But yeah, maybe. But it's kind of one of those things like if you followed any of our guides over the last few years and bought a decent motherboard, so it's kind of like if you went and bought a crap B450 board and you're a subscriber of our channel, that's on you. Like, I told you which ones were good, and they're good. Any unique hardware that you keep around still? Yeah, I keep way too much hardware. Way too much. But I've got like my first computer I ever built. Well, some of it. I wish I had all of it. What?
Nothing. Yeah, I've seen all your stuff. You got a lot.
I got a lot of crap. I don't really sell or throw much out. Usually the only way I lose things is if a friend wants something. But yeah, other than that.
Just remind everyone, how many X570 motherboards do you have?
I don't know. I've nearly got all of them. It's like over 20. Yeah. Ibslice came over recently and he saw them all. Well, I think he saw most of them. But yeah, to be like, I could go end to end on this desk and pile the boxes about that high. So yeah, that's annoying. But I was going to retest. I kept all of them because I was going to retest them with the 3950X, but that's now proven to be completely pointless because the 3950X uses less power than the 3900X by like a couple of watts.
Yep.
So I'll be doing TRX 40 VRM testing next.
Yep.
I definitely will never do any X299 VRM testing. And then probably after that, it would be like B450 or like a Z490 would probably be the next Intel roundup I would do. What was your first computer setup? Well, I've explained it a few times, but there's probably some new people here. It was an Intel Celeron 300A overclocked to 450 to 500 megahertz. Don't quite remember, somewhere in that range. And I had an A-Open motherboard, and I later upgraded to an A-Bit motherboard, and actually A-Open still exists, but I don't think they do motherboards. A-Bit's definitely dead. And I had a Creative Labs 16 megabyte Voodoo Banshee AGP. It was the first AGP card. And I think I don't even remember how much memory I had. It was megabytes of memory.
Because you're old.
And I think maybe I had a really big 80 gigabyte hard drive. I think. But anyway,
Have you seen any quality control problems with monitor brands? Where I work, Samsung panels are often the worst return, followed by whatever Acer is buying at the time. Yeah, I hear there's a lot of it depends whether you're talking about panels or the monitors themselves. I hear a lot of problems with Samsung monitors.
Okay.
Like people getting flickering issues, just like getting the worst quality crap from them.
Okay.
Which is surprising considering they make panels. It's
I've bought a lot of expensive Samsung TVs, and out of warranty, they've all died. Like, just out of warranty.
yeah, I think to me, there are lots of good brands, but Samsung just seems to struggle a bit with their. And they're not even they don't even do super cheap stuff. Like some of their monitors are expensive.
I bought a really expensive Samsung fridge, and that died as well, just out of warranty.
Yep.
So, I don't know. Samsung, but their phones have been good to me. I've still got like my original
Yeah,
phone.
their phones are good. I think Acer as well. I mean, you can sort of throw a blanket over many companies and sort of think about, you can look at reviews of people complaining about products dying, and you'll find reports for any brand. Like, there's no brand you can go, wow, you're never going to get a dud one.
Yeah.
I think Samsung probably has a bit higher than average issues with that. So
Yeah, that's important to remember. Yeah, I mean, I understand people who, again, this sort of is like the G-Sync thing. I understand people who feel a bit burnt and they're a bit salty about getting screwed over by a product, and they don't like the brand because of that, and that's why they'll go with the competitor. That's fair enough. And you've got to look after your customers if something does go wrong. Like, like one of my dad's mates bought a $300,000 Mercedes, and it just everything went wrong with it over a 12-month period. It even broke down and left him stranded. And after the 12-month period, he went into Mercedes, said, "This car has just been shit. I want my money back." And they just gave him his money back. And yeah, he went and bought some other, I think he got a Toyota. Don't have a second anyway. But that's kind of good. Like, some brands would just keep replacing it and not give you your money back. How do you decide which board to use? All the choices. I'm assuming Daniel's asking about all the X570 boards we were talking about. Basically, we test them all. So that's why certain products I commit to so heavily, so we can test a wide range of them and find out. Because for B550, MSI could be number one by a country mile, and the other three could be crap, or Gigabyte could be in the mix. Like, you just don't know. They don't seem to be able to consistently release good boards. But I think the big four, ASRock, ASUS, MSI, Gigabyte, they're all pretty switched on with the VRM thing now that that's getting properly tested. So by a few different people. So I think boards will be getting better in that regard. And VRM is important because you can't replace that. If it's got a crap audio solution and you care about audio, you'd probably buy a dedicated audio card anyway. How often would you recommend changing thermal paste on GPUs? Not very often. I don't know. Some people swear by doing that. I've got some GPUs that have been with me now for over 15 years. I plug them in and I actually stress test them in modern games. It's like the exact same temperature I reported in my review. So until they get hotter than they should. There was a member not long ago that had, who was it? Sorry, I forget your name now. Nezzy? Not sure if Nezzy's on the stream. But anyway, they bought a MSI 5700 XT Evoco C, and it was 88 degrees, whereas mine was 75. We went back and forth, and then I said, look, you either have to take it back or change the thermal paste, because either there's a seating issue or a thermal paste issue. After a month of trying various things, he took the card apart, put the thermal paste on, and it ran at 75 degrees, down from 88, and the fan speeds and everything came right down. And then I made a tweet about it, and then the MSI replaced his card and gave him a Gaming X for screwing me around.
Nice.
So, I mean, it's nice, but I kind of hate that.
You hate having to involve someone who's in the industry and has clout,
influence.
Right?
Yeah, that really pisses me off. So basically, the MSI representative that was handling his case was extremely unhelpful. And then as soon as my MSI guys got involved, he gets a Gaming X.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, we've had that happen with a few different things. But at least I kind of like that. Although I don't like that situation, I like that we can at least sort of kick in a few doors and get things happening for our Patreon members, because there's been a few of you guys in the chat that have been screwed over by various companies, and then I've been able to take your evidence, provide my contacts, and then you've been able to get a good result. And
Really,
the problem
we
is,
shouldn't be doing that. Really, we shouldn't have to do that.
we shouldn't have to, but the problem is I can't then go make a video exposing that company because it's like region dependent.
Yep.
Like, so in Australia, you know, our RMA processes and our laws and things and consumer rights are completely different to like Brazil.
Yep.
So I can't go make like an expose video and doing that. So yeah, and it's not really a service we provide. So I'm not saying we provide that service, but
You provide the service of fixing everyone's RMAs.
but sometimes I can just, you know, shoot the evidence off and it gets bumped up the queue, and then because they're worried about us doing some sort of hit piece, things happen. I don't like it at all, but you know, if we can help you guys out, we try to. But as I said, nothing's guaranteed. What phone do you use? I've got a Galaxy S. What one's that? 10, I want to say.
No idea. Did you get one
Yeah.
this year?
I think it's a 10.
It looks like a.
I loved it. Steve from Gamers
It
Nexus.
looks like a 9, I think.
Oh, no. Steve from Gamers Nexus said, 10 plus. What do you
10
know?
plus.
You used to review these things. Hopeless. Nah. I can't remember, was it in a video or was it a tweet Steve from Gamers Nexus stuff talk? Oh, no, it was setting up the Stadia thing, and Steve goes, we hate phones. And I'm like, love it. They are useful, but I use my phone as little as possible. If I've got a laptop or a desktop, I'll use that instead. Like,
I use my phone a fair bit.
yeah, it's a last resort for me.
Yeah, I've got a OnePlus 6. So nothing. Haven't upgraded it. There's no reason for me.
It's like paper thin.
Well, you've got yours in this chunky case.
Yeah.
I've only dropped and broken a phone once.
I've never.
And it was a review unit, and it was on.
Yeah, it was a 7. It
It was a
7
7,
edge.
and I hit it on the edge, and
Yeah.
it's like I'm never buying one of those phones.
So I got one, and I've never ever fumbled or dropped my phone. Except I sat in a seat very much like this, and I leant back, and I was wearing some tracky dacks, and it just slid straight out, and I had soft carpet floor, but it hit the caster wheel and just shattered. It
Yep.
fell like a foot. Oh, I was livid. Anyway,
So, yep, this is fast. There's no reason for me to upgrade. Don't need a better camera. Don't need more battery life. Don't need anything. Don't need a better screen. There's literally nothing a new phone can offer me right now that's better than this.
well, I had the Galaxy S8 Plus, and it was perfectly fine, but, you know, contract or whatever. And my dad had a crap phone, so I gave it to my dad, and it's still got perfect battery life, everything, and he's absolutely loving it.
Yep.
So,
yeah, I don't get phones on contract. I got this as a review unit like a few years ago. Just
kept it.
get off contract so I can save my phone bill a couple of dollars.
You need a tax write-off, though. I'm paying you some money.
I can tax write off other stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just
RMA Ripper. AMD Ryzen phone when? I think they'll focus on laptops first. We up to speed here?
the thing that I like on a phone is having good software, not having to deal with janky software, which is why I like the mostly pure Google experience on my OnePlus, which is why I don't want to upgrade to like a Samsung phone because like software sucks.
All right. We're over phones now, Tim. Move on. Just kidding. Steve, would you... was it Keith that asked this? Yeah. Would you think an HBM version, so high bandwidth memory, a version of the 5700 XT would be beneficial? Seems to be no matter how high you OC the GPU core, the performance increase is not there due to the GDDR6 bandwidth. Yeah, so the 5700 XT is definitely memory bandwidth limited in terms of performance. And HBM memory would definitely boost performance of the 5700 XT quite substantially, but it also boosts the price of the 5700 XT, and you'd be in a position where the 5700 XT wouldn't be worth buying because it would be priced the same as like a 2070 Super or worse, which is the problem they had with HBM memory previously. So GDDR6 with the RDNA architecture was definitely the way to go because they can make a cost-effective, cost per frame GPU. But yeah, would make it faster. I think there's a few cards that'll do like 950 on the memory, and they see like another 6% performance boost from that or something like that, which is pretty good.
We've been going for nearly an hour and a half. I think we should probably choose one final question that you want to answer, and then we will go to Nando's.
Yeah, I'm starving. Yeah, well, I think we're pretty much there. Thanks to everyone for tuning in and watching. Thanks to everyone who watches this not live. Apologies to people who would be watching this when it's like 1, 2, 3 in the morning. But maybe one day we'll do like a midnight live stream. We'll see what happens. But yeah, apologies to people who can't watch it. At least we should hopefully be able to catch you on the Discord chat or something like that.
Yeah, and of course we'll be answering all your Patreon questions from the Discord after this, and that'll go live on the channel soon. So all the questions you've been waiting for us to get to.
It'll be about 3 or 4 days before that's up. But yeah, it'll be up soonish. Soonish.
Cool.
And yeah, well anyway, thank you everyone. Oh, and I'll start getting back to trying to make a few BTS videos as well. The whole thing with Kevin, that kind of, yeah. I did some filming in New Zealand with some of the guys that were over there, so maybe, I mean, we didn't do much, so might be able to make a BTS out of that. We'll see how we go.
Yep.
Cool. Alrighty, off to Nando's. Catch us later.
See you later.